Well, I'm sure that you all enjoyed that as much as I did. And we're going to continue on with today's Fatherhood Summit. We're going to have two different topics discussed today. There'll be a combination, as I said, of listening to the fathers and their perspectives on each of these topics. One, serving fathers and families in a virtual environment, and how to better incorporate fathers' voices in our programs. We'll also throw in some research for you so that you can see the things that we've learned over time about what's working and what people are doing and thinking about. And I'm so excited that we have some panelists who will be joining us who are providers and who can share with us some of their best practices and the things that they've been so successful at doing. So again, stick with us, continue to ask questions in the chat. All of this information is going to be made available to you on our website, and the slides will be available and so forth. And thank you for all the conversations that you've started, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. So here is a father talking about how he has experienced being served in a virtual environment.
So I got the opportunity to participate in the 24/7 Dad program, and it was actually an amazing opportunity. Yeah, if I had to say one or two of my favorite things about doing the 24/7 Dad program virtually, it's just again having the opportunity not to have the excuse of, oh, I can't make it per se. There were a couple of times when I couldn't make it, but the instructors were very flexible in, sometimes just doing audio because a lot of us were, maybe maneuvering things with the children. Whereas if this virtual option wasn't, a part of our new normal, then we would have to go into an actual facility where, it might not be most conducive at 6 or 7 o'clock at night on a weekday to get away from the house of the children, every single Monday. So I did appreciate that, this virtual experience allowed for us to be in the comfort of our homes. And in some ways, it did allow, I feel like it did allow for some of the men to open up a little bit more, knowing that, we're still in a safe, secure place to share some of our feelings, and a place that we're coming to grow. So I think those were the main two things that I thought that was most advantageous about, the 24/7 Dad program virtually. So, I think if I had to say of anything that could be improved, I think, it wouldn't be anything that we could avoid at this point in our COVID new lifestyle, which have just been, being able to do things, in a fashion where we all could be in the same room. I thought that, we could have had a little bit more camaraderie. I think that would have built more camaraderie amongst us, as we finished the program and going throughout. But I think, even now today, I still keep in contact with a few of the gentlemen. But, that would have been the only thing. But to say the least, all in all, I thought the program was absolutely phenomenal. And I definitely encourage, and I have encouraged it to other single fathers and fathers, that are married and are in a healthy relationships. I think it's good for the entire gamut of the entire array of men, fathers alike. So thank you to everyone that helped to put this program together. I hope that you guys have continued success and continued growth in your membership numbers.
We just heard from a father who's participated in our programs in a virtual environment. And I want to share with you now some of the information that we've learned as we've talked to providers, both those who serve fathers and who serve the full family in home visiting programs, about how they've adapted their services. As we all know, the pandemic that came on last March really changed everything for us. And there were a lot of programs who were just getting started, and others who had had long-standing relationships with their clients And they all had to figure out how to create a new normal when they couldn't meet face to face. And there was a lot of changes that took place in a short amount of time. And I think there were many of us who thought that the pandemic would only last for a short time. But as the months kind of grew on, we came to understand that these adaptations, some of them actually were things that we were doing in a better way to serve our families and that we'll want to take with us as things begin to open up more and more. The providers told us about how they changed their programs in a number of ways. And the first was that they had to get creative and they had to understand how they could offer their services based on the comfort level that fathers had about participating in this virtual world, as well as the access to technology that fathers had in terms of whether they had laptop computers or Wi-Fi that was dependable. And that we saw that they were able to offer fathers services both in individual sessions, in group meetings. They had to really understand the level of which fathers had a private space within their home that they could meet in a group setting, how comfortable they were inviting folks into your home via Zoom. So there were things that they had to adapt to understand that this being flexible was really the name of the game. But that flexibility actually allowed more fathers to participate and to participate in ways that the fathers actually enjoyed. I think that folks do want to get back together in person in some ways, but this hybrid approach or the ability to not have to drive every week to show up at your meeting, the ability to do things by phone or to follow up and kind of briefer meetings. These are things that folks are thinking about continuing on in this new environment. Now, recruiting new participants was certainly a challenge, and it became more and more important to rely on word of mouth and to get creative in how they could reach out and get more fathers to participate. We also saw that providers found the new time that they had, that they weren't driving from office to office and program to program, that this allowed them time to recharge and to think about the services that they were providing and how they might be able to do even more, and to be able to have some more one-on-one time with fathers to support them in the individual needs that the fathers had. There was also, though, some adaptations that needed to take place with regard to paperwork. All of the programs basically relied on paper forms before the pandemic began, and many of them now have switched to new information systems that they plan to take with them and to make more permanent. When we talk to home visitors, these are folks who serve the whole family, often moms, but dads are included in many of our programs as well, that they had to really change things up as well. Their model depended on coming into the client's home and visiting with them. And their model also relies on a lot of assessments, actually hands-on, looking at the kid, checking the health of the child and the mother and so forth. So they really had to rethink how they could adapt those very personal, in-person home visits to a virtual world. And again, they got creative and used a variety of platforms. And sometimes there were the longer Zoom calls, sometimes using FaceTime, other times text and phone calls on a more kind of continuous basis for things that they felt were working better for the families. And the families actually came to enjoy this flexibility in their home visits as well. Again, some participants had a little bit of discomfort of someone kind of seeing into their home via Zoom, or that there was a lot of kind of chaos that went on during this pandemic of trying to educate our kids at home or care for our kids without childcare and manage work. And so inviting folks into your home in a virtual way
was something that we had to learn how to do in a very respectful way and to accommodate families in these transitions. But overall, we heard moms say that it was nice to be able to have a 15-minute call on their lunch break rather than a whole hour in the evening to really check in and to see how they're doing. And the programs over time have gotten a lot more sophisticated in how they can continue to do these important assessments. Sometimes driving and leaving materials at the house or on the front door. And they talked about leaving a scale outside to weigh the baby, and the mom would come out and take it in, weigh the baby, and put the scale back out. And the flexibility and creativity have been the name of the game. And that's been especially true when it's come to recruiting new families. And a lot of the things that they have done in this, adapting to this pandemic and having to move to this virtual environment are things that they plan to continue moving forward. They plan to continue to provide flexible services, both in person and online, and that they see that having a combination of programs can actually, or approaches to how they deliver their program, can really benefit the fathers and families by offering more flexibility in their scheduling, by adapting to the needs and the preferences of those families. And it allows them to participate in a way that they feel comfortable. Some also talked about the idea that fathers especially might be able to test the waters a bit and to see if this is a program that they are comfortable with by visiting in a virtual way. And that paperwork, I don't think we're going to go back to a lot of paper forms. Folks are liking this idea of being able to manage their program data in a virtual way. And it helps them to access their data more readily, to be able to analyze it, to see how well they're doing and how well their families are doing, and the needs that they're able to meet of their families. So there's a lot of changes that were made and a lot that are going to continue on. And we're going to hear from two providers who are going to share how they adapted their programs to meet fathers and families in this virtual environment. Joshua Banks from the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, and Valerie Rios from Partners in Parenting.
Well, we are really excited that these two panelists are joining us today to really share the changes that they've made in their programming. We're going to begin with Val, and then Josh will join us, and we'll have time for Q&A. So I encourage you to write your questions in the chat or any comments that you have, and we'll have time for that after they introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their programs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Osborne. It's such a pleasure to be here today. My name is Valerie Rios, and I am the Executive Director of Partners in Parenting, also known in our community as PIP. Here at Partners in Parenting, we work to build a village for all new parents, and we do that by creating parent support groups that support the whole family unit. From the conception of beginning this program, our organization recognized the need to have something in the fourth trimester that was really connected and aware of the needs of not only one parent in the family, but both parents in the family. And so from the onset of the program, we have included fathers in how we serve families. We did that pre-pandemic via in-person services in homes. So one of the most intimate ways that you could be together, and one that we have not returned to as of yet. Imagine, I know it's been 17 months, but inviting a whole group of strangers into your home, and that's how we gathered. We also gathered in community centers here in Austin, Texas, and another way that we have not been able to gather. Those were quickly replaced, both of those programs, via two measures. One is Zoom and the other is WhatsApp. So our Zoom programming started virtually overnight. It transitioned quite quickly, and our WhatsApp programming took us a little bit longer to be able to develop. We were specifically looking for a way that we could provide accessibility and also flexibility for our families that did not have access to technology. These groups meet for 8 to 10 weeks and cover everything from sleeping to feeding to developmental moments. And then we also cover together emotional changes and challenges. Each week, each family has the opportunity to share both a high and low, to learn a way to interact with their baby, and then also to review and to talk about whatever topic the facilitator is presenting each week. It's been quite a journey and a challenge to transition these programs, but we've learned so much along the way, and I can't wait to share some of these virtual wins here today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joshua Banks. I am the IDADs program coordinator for the Housing Authority of the City of Austin. IDADs is an acronym standing for Involved Dads of Action, Developing and Succeeding. Our program has been around for about 5 years now. And before the pandemic struck, we were luring dads in via barbecue and all kinds of loud music and outdoor things that would just draw men in. And then the pandemic hit, and it's like, uh-oh, now what do you do? But we had always been making a way for dads to stay involved in our program whenever they weren't able to show up in person. So we had been playing with the Facebook Messenger. We've been playing with Skype online. So we had been toying with some of these ideas. But when 2020 hit, it was time to transition full force. And so we jumped on the Zoom and we messed with some go-to meetings and toyed with different platforms to see what was going to be most comfortable for our participants. And it was very interesting to transition because a number of the dads that we deal with, some of them know all about computers. Some of them don't know very much about, technology at all. And so we were able to take some of the dads that had been participating in the program and kind of train them on Zoom and train them on different online platforms so that they could kind of help coach some of the other dads that were having trouble getting participating in the class. We've used Textedly for a number of years, and it's an app that allows you to send out a bunch of text messages. And so we use that to stay in contact with our dads. I had used some other platforms where you send out a mass text and everyone responds to it and then everybody gets the text back. And so that was a little bit problematic. But with this particular platform, I was able to send out individualized messages or send out mass messages, and people could respond back to me individually. So it gave me an opportunity to communicate messages with people, keep them up to date on how to get online, give them some coaching if they needed it, but they could reach back out to us as they needed. And of course, everyone had our phone numbers. So if all had gone wrong, they could always call me. But it was a wild, wild transition. And I think the thing that really jumped out to me the most was for a lot of our dads. So normally our program we use the 24/7 dads curriculum. And we'd have meet Tuesdays and Wednesdays for 5 weeks in a row. So we provide childcare and whatnot. And so dads would kind of come and this was kind of like their escape. This was kind of their chance to get away from everything and just sit down amongst other men and talk. But now things had transitioned and now they're back in the homes. And there was, with all the hecticness of what was going on, we found that our dads really plugged in. A lot of the dads that were already involved in the program, they really, really plugged in because this was their little oasis of safety. This was their place where they could air out their frustrations and really kind of keep themselves sane in the midst of all the insanity. So it was a very unique experience to know that dads had been leaning on us before, but in this season, even more so. And so, again, I'm excited to be here, excited for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Josh and Val. I really appreciate this and you sharing what you've done. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions to you guys so that we can just hear more from you. And then we'll definitely invite folks who are listening and to put their questions into the chat and so that we can try to address those as well. But what I really heard from you was this kind of immediate changes that you made, and then over time, really trying to refine it to get it right. And I want to talk first just about the father's reactions. Were the father's reactions kind of similar to that? There was kind of some immediate kind of reactions, and then how over time they've been able to really kind of get used to this new platform. The reason why I'm really interested in this is you've both told me, and others have, about how important the relationships are between the fathers themselves when they participate in our programs, and the others, family members, as well as the relationship between the facilitator or the provider, the navigator, and the fathers. And so, how have you been able to cultivate those relationships in this virtual environment? And what have you learned over this past 15 months to do that?
I'll let you go first, Valerie.
Okay, I'll start off and then hand the mic over to you, Joshua.
Thanks.
So I would say that you really summed it up in the way that we were kind of this a trial and error system to see how fathers were responding. I have to be completely honest. Parent support with fathers has been a hard sell for some time now, and the virtual environment did not change that. So it was only, okay, parent support, and then we have to do this virtually, really? And so just listening to the feedback, we did see that some fathers were apprehensive, while others felt the ability to be passively looking on to what was going on before they engaged completely. And I would say that was one of the benefit. I remember receiving at the very end of one of our first group ending of Father's Day, I was pleasantly surprised. I had really low expectations for how a program would be executed virtually. And that we knew was we were onto something. And what we were onto was we were able to foster the connection differently because everything is facilitated. So like we're in today, a breakout room, we could take fathers out and into breakout rooms just together if families were logged on two separate devices or specifically asked to be logged on separate devices. We also had the flexibility for fathers to attend longer sessions, whereas sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, the travel or the commute or maybe working hours would have prevented that. That accessibility and kind of that barrier to entry of transportation was minimized. I don't want to say eliminated. Right. But it really ranged from this apprehensive to being very excited about being able to log on. I think I heard you say it as well in the presentation in the beginning. There's almost a different barrier initially that you can sit back and look from before you're ready to engage.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Val. Josh, what about you? How have you guys managed to, what have you seen in terms of that relationship building and trust? How have you managed to keep that strong?
This was a heavy lift. Whenever things transitioned, it was a heavy lift in that, okay, what do we do now? And our dads were really pulling us to provide something. So it wasn't hard in the sense of transitioning per se, but it was, okay, so we wanted to make it normal. We wanted to make it comfortable for people as much as possible. And we knew that there were some dads that were going to have some difficulty with that because some people are more technologically educated than others. And so trying to get everybody to buy into it was a little bit difficult from my side of it. But then when the dad started pulling me like, hey, Josh, we need to do something. And I realized that I wasn't lifting the load by myself. And so I was thinking, okay, how am I going to sell this to the guys? And the guys were like, Josh, we need to do something. So the guys were calling each other. The guys were asking me, how do we work this thing? So if somebody has a problem, we can walk them through it. And so the dads in our group really wanted to have that safe haven. They wanted that place that they could rely on each other. And I think my eyes were open to the strength of the connection that we had been developing with dads over the last several years. We had dads that were brand new that were coming in because their friends were telling them about it. We had a guy log in from New York or something like that because he was a friend or a family member of one of the guys that had been participating in our group. And so what I noticed was that the dads were really wanting something to help. during this season. You know, there was a lot of stuff that was unknown. There was a lot of things that people were uncertain about, but something about being able to see those familiar faces really helped our dads so much. And I would ask them, you know, hey, you know, how are you feeling about the group? And they would tell me, Josh, I need to be an IDAD tonight. I need to be an IDAD tonight. And I don't know if it was just everything coming together was kind of driving people a little bit mad, but then they would get in their groups, they would just diffuse and we would be laughing. And sure, we had to overcome some obstacles and hurdles. I mean, it's one thing to be in a room full of guys and people are talking over each other. It's completely different when you're in a Zoom room and everyone's talking over each other because it's chaotic. And so I learned to master the mute all button. That is my best friend. So yeah, it was new challenges, but our dads were really excited about having something that made sense in a world that wasn't making a whole lot of sense at the time. So to be able to provide that for our dads, that was very rewarding for me.
Yeah, I can really imagine that. But tell me about the ways that you were able to recruit new participants into your programs. I've heard from folks that maintaining some of the relationships and clients that you had, you know, in March 2020 was a challenge, but doable. But finding new folks to participate could be a real struggle. I mean, Josh, you guys, you know, you get them through barbecue. How are you going to do that, right? And so tell me a little bit about your recruiting secrets and what seems to have worked in this sort of virtual environment.
I'll start off with this one. Relying on your network was very, very beneficial for us. We attend a number of different groups, whether it be the Central Texas Fatherhood Coalition or United Way has a coalition. And so there's all kinds of people that we're connected to all the time. And so relying on those relationships that you have, because people are still seeing clients, people are still interacting with folks that I don't know. And so letting them know that, hey, I'm still here. I'm available to support your dads. I've got something for your dads. That was a big thing for us. I got a lot of people that would send me, hey, you know, we got a dad that might need a little assistance. So that was a big thing for us. And then pulling on the people that were already in our group was a huge thing because, you know, my conversation would be, hey, look, if this is working for you, if this is kind of helping you to keep from going crazy, there's somebody you know that this could probably do the same thing for them. And so just kind of putting that out there, we'd throw some incentives out to get our guys to get that little extra boost to go do something. But I noticed that with some of our guys that had been there for a while, the incentive wasn't the thing that they were looking forward to. It was bringing somebody in to, you know, bring another member of the brotherhood in. And so definitely leaning heavily on our relationships, both our professional relationships and the relationships with the dads that we have was one of our big moves in recruiting new dads.
Yeah, that word of mouth and those relationships are probably something that you'll continue to do just because that, you know, we know that those are the folks who actually stay in our programs the longest when they're referred by a trusted source. But Val, what about you guys? What have you done in order to try to keep your new folks coming into your program the same way that you were before?
Well, this was a real challenge for us at the onset of the pandemic. We rely just under half of our new families come to us via word of mouth and via direct referrals. And they get those referrals from being out in the community, really seeing their practitioner in person or their physician or their OBGYN in person, or maybe seeing another family out on a playground as places that we weren't really present in the past year. And so we had to think a little bit outside of the box and think about, again, just like Josh said, but reaching out to our strong partners, sending out a text via United Way, and then also rethinking the amount of time and energy that we spent on things like Facebook and Instagram, to social media, to be on those social media platforms, which really, to be quite honest, was not a space that we spent a lot of time on prior to March of next year. And then sharing the stories of those families that had gone through our program and had said what an anchor it was in this deep sea of isolation. we serve parents and families within the first year of parenthood, and we found that fathers were even more isolated than they normally would have been. So like Josh was saying, that your world became really, really small. So having this outlet or this place to be able to go weekly, consistently, to rely on the support of other families who are really weathering the storm of parenthood with you became really invaluable.
Yeah. So talk about the weathering of the storm. What were some of the needs that you saw that your families were facing that were somewhat unique over this past year? And did you have to adapt the content or the services that you provided to try to help them in meeting some of those huge challenges that so many faced?
Yes, we had a rise in families asking for support packages. So our support packages include grocery gift cards and also diapers and wipes. And so a need for families to receive more than what we were giving prior to the pandemic. In addition, we had a need for families to have a space to talk about the uncertainty that they were experiencing during the pandemic. So we developed new modules that were specific and really targeted on COVID-19, and to talk about really just the magnitude that it was taking on families' lives and fathers' lives. We saw families suffer unemployment or job loss. And so supporting families as they the storm, they weathered that storm and doing that together.
Josh, what about you? I mean, the families that you serve are primarily in public housing units within the city of Austin. What were some of the unique challenges that some of your families experienced over this past year, and how did you meet those challenges?
Well, we definitely saw people, job loss was the thing that happened. But I think the thing that we saw the most was mental health became such an issue in 2020, especially when you start talking about people. We had some elderly dads in our program that they didn't realize, like, once they're in their home by themselves and they weren't using the computer a whole lot, because before 2020, they could go out and go do what they wanted to do. But once they were locked in that house and they weren't that familiar with technology, that depression would kick in hard. And so it was very important for us to be available to our dads and be able to give them that kind of support. And I took, it was about 3 hours on a Zoom call with the dad, walking him through just, okay, this is this. Okay, let me see your screen. I'm going to show you my screen. We're going to go through this thing together, because they were literally, as she had said earlier, isolated. People were feeling so isolated. And so that was one side of it. And then you had the other side of it where dad's accustomed to being, outside of the house a lot of the time, but now this dad is in the house and he's having to deal with the frustrations of, how am I going to provide? Oh, and now I'm teaching. Oh, and now I'm helping my kids with their Zoom, and I don't know what this stuff is myself. And so for me, I think a big theme for us was really providing the support for mental health. And so some of the things we would do in our sessions would be focused around mental health. We would bring people in that could talk about, hey, this is how you breathe, and this is what breathing is going to do for you. And we did a session once where we had a guy just showing some breathing techniques, and I was kind of scared that everyone was going to fall asleep because we were doing like 5 minutes of breathing. But at the end of it, we just asked him, hey, so how do you feel? And people are like, oh my God, I've never been at peace like that in my life. Wow. And to offer something like that during a time like this is just a priceless tool to give to somebody. Say, hey, this is something you can do to keep yourself healthy during this season. So we focused a lot on the mental health aspects of our dads and helping to keep them okay upstairs. There was so many, intimate partner violence stuff that just shot through the roof this last year. And so we knew that focusing on mental health and conflict resolution was going to be extremely important during this time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing to that is that we also saw a rise. So the last couple of weeks, fathers and mothers can select what they want to talk about, and parent and anger frustration was one of those topics that came up more frequently than we've ever seen come up before.
And what were you able to do to facilitate discussions in that area? And what were some of the things that they really wanted to talk to you about?
Well, just like Josh was sharing, we rely on our network and bring in guest speakers to help talk. A lot of it is about breathing, about acknowledging your own feelings, talking about your feelings, giving families and parents the vocabulary, fathers the vocabulary to name what they're feeling. And then to even talk about that together. So to be able to come back week to week and say, I was able to use that breathing exercise or meditation exercise. I was able to tell my partner that I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling mad, I'm feeling sad or anxious, and then walk away and take a few moments before resuming in whatever interaction they were in.
Yeah. Yeah, usually as parents, we are able to control our own emotions. So when our children are struggling with their own, we can stay calm. But this past year and a half has been a real, a challenge for all of us. And so I can just imagine how, as the parents' distress has increased, that made it even more difficult to have relationships between partners or their children. So Josh, you touched on this a little bit, literally walking folks through how to use technology. But as a researcher for a long time, we were very concerned about the move toward conducting research online. Most of our surveys are now administered, so you can take them on your smartphone or, via your computer. And we've always been concerned that we're leaving out the most vulnerable or disadvantaged folks, those folks who don't have this. Are you concerned, or either of you concerned, and have you made any efforts to reach those for whom this sort of virtual environment was a real challenge to even access? They just didn't have the technology or knowledge. What were some of the strategies that you used to make sure we don't lose those folks?
Well, I'll jump out. We had a couple of dads in our group that have been, faithful to our group for a number of years, that both deal with some different mental health challenges. And so for them, the technology part was really frustrating. And I think what we did is we paid extra attention to those people when it came time to doing things that they could understand. So if I'm not going to be able to spend an hour and a half on a Zoom call with someone, then I can call them on the phone, or I can text them, or I can make myself available to them via a pathway that they are familiar with or that they are comfortable with. Because you're right, a lot of guys were feeling isolated. We had one guy in particular, one of the two gentlemen I was talking about, saying, I really want to be a part. I want to be involved. I just can't understand this. It's just too much for me. And so, we would call him and we would check in on him, make sure he was okay. And that is a concern of mine in those types of situations. So I'm so thankful for the opportunity to be able to get back out. One of the things we did at the Housing Authority is make information available to people about vaccinations and where they can go get their shots, and just kind of bombard people with information like, look, we're going to bring it right to your door, because a lot of people felt so isolated during that season. And so, we would compensate where we could, but I'm just so thankful to be able to tell them, hey, look, if you want a vaccine, you can come out and get it. And the ease that would come over those people, because now they feel like they can reconnect back to the world. But yeah, we had to reach out and look after some of those people, because there was that concern of what happens when they're by themselves so much.
Yeah. Val, what about for you guys? Were there things that you had to do to really make sure that those folks who don't have simple access to technology were able to continue to engage?
As I alluded to, that we launched Zoom virtually overnight, but that our WhatsApp program took us a little bit longer. We initially thought, okay, collecting laptops, distributing laptops, maybe that's the path forward. But then really listening and working with what families already had in-house, and even so simple as what apps were already on families' phones. And so that was really the path forward, to first take an inventory of what is the common thread that most everyone has, and then move forward from there.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about the strategies that you guys are going to continue to take with you, but I also just want, the thing that I really appreciate by what you're sharing today is how much of a challenge this has been. I think there might be some other providers out there who must think we're the only ones who struggled through this, or they might feel relieved to know that that this was a challenge for everyone. But it was also a challenge for you and those who serve the dads. What did you have to do to take care of your facilitators, yourselves, your folks who were really trying to accommodate all of these needs of the families, when I'm sure you were struggling through some of this like we all were as well?
We're like, who's gonna go? I'll go first.
I should probably call. It doesn't matter, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Again, that's a big one.
It's
It is a big one. Be patient. Be patient. Be patient. It was frustrating, and as I was working with some of our facilitators, you know, they had their moments where they were frustrated. And so my job or my role is to offer them kind of that sounding board. Hey, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. It was such a wonderful thing when PEI would communicate with us. Hey guys, we understand it's crazy for everyone right now, so relax. And so we were all kind of able to take a deep breath, because it was just so unknown, and there was such high anxiety, and you want to be able to provide for your families. You want to make sure that you're doing all the things you said you were going to do. Then you're dealing like, am I a failure? Is my program a failure? Is this challenging the integrity of who I am? Me and the guys that I work with, we had a couple of meetings where we would just sit on the phone and be like, hey, how are you feeling? Okay, well, we're going to listen to that. It's okay. If you got to scream, yell, here's a great safe space to do it. And just providing that environment for them to relax, so that we could strategize, we could kind of get our minds like, what kind of things do we see that are working? What kind of things can we change? And for me, my biggest thing was just learn to have fun with this thing and laugh a whole bunch, because we made so many mistakes trying to figure everything out. And there were so many moments where things didn't make sense. All right, cool. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to laugh and have a good time, and I'm going to learn something from it, because the alternative is to keep going down that hole of crazy, and that's not helping anybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Oh boy, so important. Val, what about you? How did you guys manage self-care in this this past year?
Well, pretty early on, our team recognized that we were going to have to hold so much more. I mean, our job is to hold space for fathers and parents, and then there was so much more to hold. So we can't give what we don't have ourselves. I think that's the saying, right? And it's not one that we wanted to hear this past year, but talking over and over about how we can build more support in order to give more support. So what that looked like for us, and it's really been a huge positive impact on our programming, was building a structure of support around our facilitators that we didn't have. They used to come in, be trained, and almost go out into the wilderness. And we realized that that wilderness needed a little bit of safe space itself. So bringing the facilitators up through the training and then holding space for them as they went through the program. So what does that look like in practicality? It means now there's monthly facilitator check-ins where the facilitator can come in and say, my families, they're holding space for all these families. There's holding space for all these fathers. Share about what that experience is like. Be heard by their peers who are doing the same kind of work in the field. And then as a team, just be really consistent that we are being flexible with one another. And again, looking at this from a way of being able to reinvent or become innovative in the way in which we serve fathers, where sometimes it's hard to get a little bit snowed under. We had snow. That was a really bad analogy, but yes, on top of everything, under the heaviness of it all, really.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The idea, Josh, of laughing, of Val supporting each other, and realizing that this is something that it takes all of us to support one another in order to be successful. I'm sure that actually helped your families understand that as well. So we had a question come in on the chat, and I'm actually really curious if, as a teacher, I might steal your ideas here, but what did you find to be one of the best activities that you could use via Zoom or others to really draw fathers out and to have them participate in discussion? Was there any sort of strategy or anything that you did to get folks to turn on their cameras and put themselves off mute and engage with each other?
Well, when you put two fathers in a breakout room with only two, there's only the two of you, then the camera's got to go on. So,
yeah.
I think the breakout.
It's funny you said that, because I was about to say breakout rooms. Breakout rooms.
It's true, right? You lose that sense of anonymity, and you're able to have discussions, and yeah, I think that is so important.
And then to be really creative. Sorry to go on there. To be creative with those discussion prompts. I'm not sure if anyone is completely exhausted by some of those, but I think give structure and flexibility so that if you're sending people into this virtual space, they're zooming off to another room, they have the structure to rely on if there's some element of social anxiety, but then they also have the flexibility to say, I really have enjoyed what you said 10 minutes ago, and then go off on that tangent that will provide connection. So allowing the space for both of those two routes to really be an option.
And I was going to say, really focusing on facilitating is important, especially in the Zoom platform. When we're in the real life platform, a lot of times the conversation just popcorning back and forth. But sometimes there's like that weirdness about the Zoom rooms where there's a hesitation and there's that awkward silence. And so I was, if I have like a group of people in the room, all right, so you're going to say something about yourself, describe yourself as a color, and then when you're done, you're going to pick the person that goes after you. And just to keep the thing going, because if you don't be very intentional in keeping the thing moving, then you can have those lulls and you can have those little moments where it's kind of like everyone's just looking at each other.
It's so interesting that you say this. I mean, these are things that make for great facilitation outside of the Zoom environment too. Mm-hmm. So are any of these strategies the things that you have put in place in terms of facilitation, training, support? Talk to me about what you're taking with you as we kind of move back into the opportunity for us to be more in person. Describe what you're both thinking in terms of, are you going to maintain some virtual options? And how do you think some of the lessons that you've learned are going to change what you do moving forward? Val, do you want to start?
Sure. I think we have really strong facilitators and a program, like I mentioned already, that supports the facilitators. We also have now transitioned our team. So we have a staff, a team member dedicated to supporting our facilitators and our volunteer, which I think is really important. And I'm just glad that it's in place now. Also, we won't ever lose virtual programming. I think it'll be something that will stay with us and continue to allow us to reach families that we may not have been able to reach due to some of those barriers that I mentioned earlier, such as transportation, but also maybe a family, for whatever reason, is not able to be in person. They will always have the option for support.
Can I just clarify with you if you're going to, at the beginning, when someone signs up to participate in a program, will they have a virtual option and an in-person option, or can they go back and forth throughout? That's difficult to have people in person and online in the same group. What are you thinking about doing in terms of balancing virtual and in person?
That's a great question. There was this initial idea of, do you set, a computer on a chair as everyone goes around? That's not the direction that our programs are moving in. We will have a virtual option where all participants will be virtual. We're also piloting right now a hybrid option where families are able to be online for a portion and then come together halfway through and then at the end of the program, and then returning to in-person services as well.
Gotcha. So you'll have
a menu.
All three. Yeah. What about you, Josh? What are you going to do as you're more and more able to have folks meet in person? Are you going to maintain some options, and how will you actually execute that?
All of the above. Listen, we're gonna zoom it out from here until the end of time. We're gonna always offer some type of a virtual option for our dads. Some dads, in times past, it would be maybe a childcare issue or a transportation issue, and so we would Skype them in. And so we've actually done the computer room in the group, and it's been interesting. And so, but it was always kind of funny because somebody might be in the middle of a tangent and then someone would be speaking from the phone, like, hold on, let's talk to the phone. So we bring the phone up so everyone's talking to the phone for a little bit. So we're going to be experimenting with a hybrid model where we're going to have the people there live in person, and then we're going to have the people on the screen, and we're going to have microphones so everyone can hear everything that's going on. We're going to just see what works. We're going to see what works, and we're going to be open to making mistakes and laughing at each other. One of the things we emphasize in our group is to enjoy yourselves and have a good time when you're in that setting. And so when things go a little bit weird or quirky, it's something to laugh about. When someone's really, trying to set up the thing and it doesn't go the way that it needs to go, that's fine. We all make those mistakes, and we're going to have a good time. We're going to laugh about it. And we're going to do everything we can to include as many dads in an environment that provides them that safe space. And then we'll throw out some surveys to see how effective or non-effective things are, and then we'll tweak as we need to.
Yeah, that makes sense, that we're just going to continue to learn. I mean, that's what we've learned just from our events. We can reach so many more folks in a virtual environment, but we do miss some of that, in-person conversation and contact. So figuring out the right balance is going to just be something that we're going to continue to do. Josh, you've played a real important role in thinking about how to move some of the paperwork and consent forms and registration forms and all of those things so that they're much easier to access and easier for you to use that information to kind of make changes to your program as you go. Can you talk a little bit about some of the innovations or changes that you've done in that space over the past year and what you've learned from that?
I have two words that revolutionized my life: Google Docs. Wait, Forms. Google Forms. That's what it was. See, I couldn't even get the two words right. Google Forms changed my world. We had a couple of different programs where we would take the document and it'll scan it and they'll make a digital copy of it. But man, when I got into Google Forms and I just made the actual form version of everything, that was life-changing for me because you're getting the same information. You can shorten the little link, so it's a real short link that people can access on their phones, their computers, their emails, and you're getting all the stuff that you need right there in front of you. And then the beautiful part was getting the graphs and all the actual demographics right there in front of you in a picture. So the way you can articulate that to other people was a lot easier to do. And so that helped me out because when I first started out, I was literally calling people on the phone, asking them all the questions, writing everything down. And that's one way to do it. But it has been so much easier to send that little small link to somebody's cell phone. They fill the thing out. It takes them 5 or 6 minutes, if that long. You've got what you need. and they don't feel like they've been, just interviewed for the, last 10, 15 minutes. Although I will say this, and I've said this a couple of times, the more that as a facilitator you can make everything a fun process, the more it becomes a fun process. So if I were to actually go back to the old way of doing things and call somebody on the phone, listen, buddy, I'm going to call you. This is going to be an interview and we're going to have a good time. And that's what we do. We have a good time. It gives me a chance to know them. So I think all things work together for the good if you work them together for the good. But there are some strategies that can shortcut the process a little bit.
Yeah. And I also like what you said about you had the information in real time that you've mentioned before, how you'd have to collect the forms, enter the data, and then create the graphs. And you would then be able to say, oh, look at the demographic makeup of my groups or their needs or whatever it might be. So that real time information seems to have been something that was valuable to you as well. Is that right?
Loved it. I loved it.
Val, what about with you? Have you guys always had digital forms? Have you had to change any of your paperwork or the way that you're using information now that you're collecting it? You can't have people fill out the paper forms in the same way.
Yeah, I was chuckling while Josh was talking because a lot of what we were planning to do got just pushed forward so much quickly. And really, we are still working on this and trying to figure out what's the best way. As we know that the majority of families and fathers and mothers that sign up for our program are doing that via a mobile device. We have to be able to, we didn't simply go to Google Forms. We had a data entry, a CRM that we were using, but then we found out we serve families in both English and Spanish. And so the translation wasn't functioning properly. And so it's, again, a trial and error of figuring out what is going to be the best system that allows us to receive the data that we need from families, but also is user friendly and not even user friendly, really user kind. Mm-hmm. You don't want to eliminate the barrier to entry to be transportation, and your new barrier to entry is now registering or signing up for your program.
Right. That makes a really good point that we don't need to introduce new barriers for sure. We only have about a minute left. And so I just want to give you kind of the last, each of you 20, 30 seconds to just reiterate what you think that you kind of one thing you're going to take away with you from this past year as you move forward. I'll give you a minute to think about that, Val. So Josh, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Thanks. I thought you were about to give me a minute. No, listen, have fun. That is the one thing that has been the repetitive message that we've been saying in our groups. There's so many stressors, and when that year happened, we realized how easy it was to get bombarded by all the weight, and just learning how to breathe is a game changer. It clears your head, it clears your mind, and you're able to approach things from a practical, a logical perspective when you have fun and breathe. Our work is very valuable. People's lives are impacted by what we're doing, but learning to live in that moment and enjoy it, because what we do it's good work.
Yeah, it is good work, Josh, what you guys do. Val, what about you? What's the one thing that you'd say you're taking with you?
Taking away that this is really an opportunity, as I mentioned before, to be innovative and to think how we can do things differently in a more efficient and more productive way to serve our community. So I think just using this as an opportunity to use the whiteboard eraser, erase it, and then rethink how we kind of structure the way in which we serve. I also think we're taking away the ability to remain creative and curious and to be extremely grateful for those small, tiny moments of connection and conversation that naturally occur that aren't, as Josh said earlier, so well facilitated. That connection is also really valuable.
Wow. Well, thank you both for sharing all of this that you've been doing. And thank you for all the great work that you do. I really appreciate it. And I know that those who are watching do as well. You too could participate in every panel that we're going to have today and tomorrow. But I do appreciate that you sharing about how you've adapted to this virtual environment. So everyone, please join me in thanking Val and Josh.